Hi everyone, I'm Martin. Welcome to my new channel, Accidentally Detailed, where details are made by accident. On the table is BRDM-2. I built most of it 12 years ago. Then I took a long break. During that time I had just few episodes of modeling for myself. Now I'm getting back to modeling and you can join my journey. I hope it's interesting to see how a project can come back to life after many years. Here are some close-up to show the work I have done so far. Step 1 of weathering, let it sit decayed. The turret was ready, just waiting for the PA shield to be added. I used black CA glue, which helps me see exactly where it goes. Any excess glue was removed using VMS debonder. This model had a lot of holes for parts from other vehicle versions. I started by filling them with Tamiya epoxy putty. Then I used Tamiya basic type putty to create a smooth final surface. Once the putty dried, I carefully sanded it to avoid damaged details around. It's satisfying to see all those holes disappear. The original light cakes from the box were completely out of scale, so I decided to make new ones. To begin, I found leftover PA frame in my stash and cut out the strip for the new cage. Next, I cleaned the strip by sanding the leftover connections with diamond file. Then I made the strip straight using smooth J pliers. I bent it roughly around the original box cage to get the approximate shape. Then I bent it more around the handle of file to form the basic cage frame. With the basic frame complete, I can move on to adding the bars. The first bar is horizontal, forming the main support for the cage. Then I added two smaller vertical bars, connecting them to the horizontal one. The CA glue not only holds the bars, but also simulates the welds. It's a delicate process, but the results is worth the patience. To prevent the bars from falling, I use piece of plastic for support while the glue set. It was satisfying to remove the support and see the cage all together. The new cage are much more to scale than the original box parts. Next I added the wires for the lights to bring more detail to the model. I used very thin wires, bundled them together and glued them into the drilled holes. After the CA glue dried, I carefully separate each wire for the individual lights. It takes a little patience, but each wire ends up perfectly in place. Finally, I cut excess length with sharp scalpel. Next, I cut small plastic rod for the interior of the light. Then I glued the plastic piece into light. I drilled a tiny hole in the plastic rod to act as a holder for the light bulb. Then I softened the plastic with a touch of plastic cement. Also drill a small hole where the wire will later be connected. Many of these vehicles in Chernobyl had lights without cover glass, so I wanted to add some realistic interior detail. I carefully put the wires into the holes I drilled earlier and aligned them. Finally, the cage was glued into place. To add the bolts to the cage, I started by applying a bit of CA glue. As you can see, my first attempt didn't go exactly as planned, thanks to my iron steel hands. After a bit of patience, I finally got the bolt in place correctly. The lights survived my shaky hands and they seem happy where they are. Next, I recreated the forgotten welds around the handles. I applied a small piece of Tamiya epoxy putty where each handle connects to the hull. Using a wet toothpick, I shaped the putty to form the basic weld shape. Then I used a wet brush to soften the putty and smooth the shape. Finally, I shaped the tiny weld beams into the putty using a wet scalpel. Most of the welds are in place roughly where the photos show. The first step of current work is make hatches more thin. I sanded them on piece of sandpaper to make them thinner than out of the box. This helps them look more realistic and scale accurate. Now thickness is roughly half of the original. Next came the bolts, which I needed to add since these big hatches will stay open. I started by drilling small holes on the opposite side of each hatch so the bolts will look like they go all the way through. I took a piece of plastic from the model frame, heated it carefully above a candle until it softened. and stretch it to make thin plastic rods. Then I cut the plastic rod into small pieces and glued them into the prepared holes with plastic cement. The rod is needed to hold in place while the glue sets. Once the glue dried, I carefully trimmed all the rods to the same length to mimic the bolts' bodies. These tiny bolts really makes difference. Fingers crossed they don't fly off while painting. Next, I added the handle to the open front edge by gluing a short plastic rod in place with thick revel contactor. Thicker cement gives me more time to adjust the position. I applied a small amount of black CA glue. Finally, I glued a small leftover PA piece on top of the rod to represent the handle. Next missing detail was the shovel holder, again made from the scrapyard. And here come the bolts again. Surprisingly, they behave it this time. At last, I cleaned up the excess CA glue using debonder. For the front windows, I wanted to add some damage-inspired BRDM reference photos from Chernobyl. I used the kit clear parts and worked from backside, gently scraping irregular lines with scalpel to imitate cracked glass. Doing this from the inside keeps the outside surface smoother and the effect more acceptable. The result isn't perfect, but it tells the story. And here is the finished BRDM-2 rotating for a final look. All the cracks, welds and tiny details are in place. The best part? I didn't spend a penny on aftermarket sets. All the little details were made from leftover spruce, scraps and whatever I could find at home. Thanks for watching. More shaky modeling adventures are on the way.